So what is a good decision? I'd like to engage you in a group discussion at this point. And what I want you to consider is the following question. A good decision is one that what? How might we respond to that or answer that question? Any ideas? A good decision is one that what?
Helps meet your objectives.
Achieves an objective? Yeah. Helps meet your objectives?
Yep.
To quote your word for word, Sam? Yeah.
I think it's also one that makes people equally happy and unhappy.
That's it. I haven't had that before, Ben. So that's interesting. Makes people equally happy and unhappy. What do you mean?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it in sort of negotiation, mediation context, where when you mediate a good decision for two parties, the best indicator of that is neither party is completely happy with the outcome. You've just reached the best outcome for those two people.
So you've achieved outcomes, but there are trade-offs for both parties?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. That's an interesting one. I haven't had that one before. I think in the context of negotiation in particular, that could quite possibly hold true. Yeah. So helps you to achieve your objectives, renders more than one party both happy and unhappy in the sense that trade-offs are recognised between parties. What else? A good decision is one that what?
Doesn't create adverse consequences that are larger than the benefits.
Doesn't create adverse consequences that are larger than the benefits. Yeah, so one which achieves an outcome where the benefits exceed the costs. Is that a fair way of paraphrasing? Yeah, in that cost-benefit analysis type sense. Anything else?
I would say that is ethical and no one is made less by it.
Okay, so that is ethical and no one is made less by it. I think the second part of that dovetails fairly well with Ben's, the idea that all parties, for example, are benefiting. Yeah. And is ethical. There's an ethical dimension in there. Yeah. Daniel?
I think a good decision is entirely reflective upon the criteria you're putting to it. Because a good decision may not be necessarily ethical, may not get outcomes for everyone. That doesn't mean it wasn't a good or a bad decision. It's depending upon which criteria it's being judged on.
Okay, yeah. So
I'm not giving you a specific as such. I'm looking from an overall lens. A good decision's
it's one you can live with.
Yeah, look, it depends on the criteria. Because I think it's very much situation by situation what determines good in this situation.
So if it achieves your objectives based on your criteria for success.
Correct.
Okay.
Or not
Sorry?
But to the outcome that you are trying to achieve.
To the outcome, yeah. What if I was to say, and I'll come back to your point, Leanne, about the ethical dimension, because there are, from a decision analysis perspective, there are three dimensions to a decision. You've got the ethical, you've got the prudential, which is, will this achieve our objective? And you've got the legal. In other words, will this put me in the can, right? Is it legal? So there's sort of three dimensions there. What if I was to summarize and say a good decision is one that leads to a good outcome? What do we think of that?
It's relative to what the impact of that decision is.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. What if we aligned that with Daniel's point about criteria? So if we've got clear criteria for success, the decision that we take achieves the outcome, is that a good decision? Probably. Yeah, I can see some furrowed brows. All right, let's engage in a thought experiment. Let's imagine that you're at a hotel one night. You've had a fair bit to drink, nothing wrong with that. And you know that you're over the legal blood alcohol limit to drive a motor vehicle, okay? Your goal is to get home, arrive home safely. You decide to drive home and you arrive safely. Is that a good outcome? No one trusts me at this point at all.
It's a good outcome, but was it a good decision?
Yes. I would say that if your goal and your criteria for success is to arrive home safely, it is a good outcome. You know what's coming. Was it a good decision? No, it wasn't. Okay. Let's flip it around. Let's imagine that you try to do the right thing. Okay. You're over the limit and you decide to get a taxi or an Uber home. okay, and bam, you get T-boned by a four-wheel drive at an intersection, and unfortunately you're killed. And I do apologise for the morbid analogy. Is that a good outcome? No, I can see Matt going, no. No, I agree, it's not. No, I think we can all agree, okay? No tricks there. That's a bad outcome. Was it a bad decision? Was it a good decision? It was a good decision, yeah. And this is the point. You can make a bad decision and get a good outcome, okay? You can make a good decision. I mean, taxis, so kind of, 2010. Uber really should be. You can make a good decision and get a bad outcome, okay? And this is because decisions and outcomes are logically distinct from one another. Again, there's nothing intuitive about that, okay? I've run these sessions for 5 or 6 years, as I said, and I'm yet to run a session out of maybe 20 or 30 of this particular course, in one form or another, where people have straight away understood this, because it's so counterintuitive. But when it's framed like that, we can see that those two things are actually logically distinct, okay? It's like getting insurance, for example. If you get insurance and your house doesn't burn down, do you look back and go, terrible decision, I really shouldn't have gotten insurance, okay? No. So why bother making good decisions is the point here. I've said because a good decision can be expected to maximize the probability of a good outcome. Fundamentally, we live in and are dealing with an uncertain world. And uncertainty is often the key problem faced by decision makers. In fact, for all organizations, we're dealing with uncertainty. Okay, so the question becomes, how do we deal with that uncertainty? And at a fundamental level, we deal with it using probability. Okay, that's the best we can do. If anybody's got a better explanation or a better way of thinking about it, I'm all ears, I'm open to that. But that's the most logically robust position that I've come across, having studied this systematically. Sorry, Daniel.
That's why in a lot of situations you run a risk matrix
Yeah.
for the probability of it. What's the likelihood of this and what's the severity of that happening if it was to happen? Ergo, you're running on the probability. If that was the case, we put more resource to more probability and more effect rather than what's low probability, less effect.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's interesting, isn't it, Daniel? Because I think people do utilize probabilistic tools quite often.
Yeah.
And yet there's that intuitive idea that, we got a good outcome, therefore it must have been a good decision, which can be disastrous when you go to promote somebody who's been lucky. And that happens. Just large numbers statistically, that happens, where you get people who make several bad decisions, but they pan out due to circumstances quite often beyond any of their control, and which have very little to do with any decision they've made, okay? And I've said, make no mistake, for most people, this requires a fundamental change in the way that they think about decision making. And as someone who bought a second-hand vehicle myself about a year ago, which turned out to be a complete lemon, I have to remind myself of this, okay? I went through all of the processes, and I'm constantly assuring my partner, who rolls her eyes, and said, look, I did all my due diligence. It was a good decision at the time. And she says, yeah, well, we just spent $3,000 getting it fixed, so, great. She's still thinking about outcomes, which I understand. So it does take some mental discipline to sort of really put this into practice, both personally and professionally. So this is the definition that I'd like to propose in this session and use for the rest of the day. And again, I'm open to alternative definitions. This is not the only one. I want to suggest to you that a good decision is one that is logically consistent with what we want, what we know, and what we can do. Yeah, Daphne, I can see you thinking there's a lot there, isn't there? There's a lot in that, I think. I'll repeat it. A good decision is one that is logically consistent with what we want, what we know, and what we can do. What do we think of that as a definition? I'm aware, of course, that I've just lobbed it on you, but it strikes me that there's an extraordinary amount of depth to that. And that's put forward by Professor Ron Howard from Stanford University, someone that I was fortunate enough to study under and be instructed by. He's considered the founding father of modern decision analysis. Okay. Interestingly, the reason he's considered the founding father of modern decision analysis is that he produced published the first decision analysis of how to buy a second-hand car in 1966. Yeah? Because whether you're building a submarine or whether you're buying a second-hand car, you have to think, is what we're doing consistent with what we want, what we know, and what we can do? What we want, goals, values, and objectives. What we know, information on which we're basing our decision, and what we can do, capabilities and resources. Okay, these are very much three pillars on which good decisions are based.